Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa barakatuh. What screen am I sharing? What screen is being shared? Checking on YouTube, please. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We are about to start this morning. We'll invite everybody to please mute their phones, and we welcome you all to this weekend's edition of the program by Guild of Muslim Professionals, NASFAT, MPAC, and MICA to present an understanding and the way to access the Sharia compliant facilities. I'm going to hand over now to Mr. Neil Yusuf, the CEO of Verake and also the president of NASFAT, who is going to take us through the session and the introductions. Mr. Neil Yusuf, please.
Thank you so much, Akim, and let me also add my welcome and thanks to everyone for joining this session. We had the first edition last Saturday. Today is the second one, and inshallah we'll have a third session coming Saturday on the 5th of September. And all three sessions are focused on improving our understanding of the CBN Sharia capital, and also improving how we can not only understand, but how we can assess the various Sharia compliant loan. For long, Muslims have been asking for this kind of facilities that will allow us to access funding and access capital that is aligned with our faith. And it reminds me of the way we also asked for the creation of non-interest banking, and which the CBN or the banking industry did after a while. And that led to Sterling Non-Interest Bank, to Jaiz Bank, to Taj Bank, etc. And so alhamdulillah, this year also now the central bank and the banking industry have launched these alternative schemes. And so it's our pleasure from NASFAT to collaborate with the Guild of Muslim Professionals, MICA, and Marble Capital to provide these 3 sessions. Today, we'll be listening to 2 distinguished gentlemen as they talk to us about the financing option for the creative industry and also the financing options that are available for the healthcare sector. And so we have Mr. Mohammed Jega, a friend and a brother, who's a Shariah fintech entrepreneur, who will be sharing insights in terms of the opportunities for the CBN Shariah Intervention Fund in the creative industry. And then we have Dr. Muhammad Dabiri Al-Furqan from the Crescent University, who will be sharing insights on how this fund can be assessed for the healthcare sector. Last Saturday, we had insights into how it can be assessed by the SMEs and the agricultural sector. And of course, we also were told about the importance of amana. Our Muslims must pay back the debts that they have accessed, which is important. And inshallah, next coming Saturday, we will have insights into the non-oil exports and also some other targeted credit facility. And our hope and our prayer is that with all these knowledge and sharing sessions, it will afford more Muslims the opportunity to be able to package their products, develop the right application plan, and be able to access these products. So once again, on behalf of the Guild of Muslim Professionals, NASFAT, MICA, and MPAC, it's my honor to welcome each and everyone to today's session, and I hope Allah will grant us a successful seminar today. Thanks. And we'd like them to start the first session in earnest so that we continue to keep to time. So from SunTrust Bank, my brother and friend, Mohammed Jega.
Thank you very much, sir. So we have Mr. Mohammed Jega, who is represented by Mr. Abubakar Rumal to give his speech now. Bismillah.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. I would like to thank this wonderful forum for this opportunity. It was quite a short notice for me to actually step in on behalf of my good friend, Mr. Mohammed Ibrahim Jega, who unfortunately cannot be available, but is such a worthwhile and worthy cause that he deemed it necessary for somebody to step in on his behalf. So I will try and do my best, and may Allah help me in delivering what he mandated me to deliver. In terms of opportunities in the creative and technological space, I would have to talk from a technology perspective, being a technologist myself. My background is in technology, computer engineer, and I also run a technology firm. And I've been doing that for the last 20 years or so. every time these kind of fora comes up, I always have to superimpose technology in whatever sector we're looking at. And with this CBN initiative, I think it's a fantastic opportunity for the Muslim Ummah, business community, academia, microeconomic grassroots movement to actually key into this wonderful initiative and try and grow social economic indices. When we look back at the 2008 financial meltdown, the global financial meltdown, it was to many a disaster. Many businesses faced a lot of disasters, and many went under, some banks went under, but this created the fintech revolution, the financial technology revolution. So while banks were busy dealing with regulatory fines and reporting and compliances during that period, a gap was created where customers now were not looking at what banks were offering, but rather looking at what fintech companies were offering them in terms of user experience and convenience perspectives. This gap was primarily taken up by technology companies. So I'm just trying to put into perspective to you that there are always opportunities in every single disaster, like, per se. If we look at this current pandemic, this COVID-19, what it has done is basically it has pushed a global reset for practically almost every single way of doing things, particularly businesses. The traditional brick and mortar ways of doing business has changed. And I think anybody who's waiting for things to calm down and get back to normal has totally missed the point and missed the bus. So in light of this, I also see this as an opportunity. Many people initially did not know what Zoom was, but the COVID-19 pandemic brought a lot of people to the forefront of technology. And for me, being a technologist, I think it's one of the primary drivers for the 21st century business enterprise that will be driven by technology. When I look at the CBN initiative, particularly the vertical markets that we're looking at in terms of information technology and creative spaces like fashion, music, and the movie industry, I see a great deal of opportunity for people to key into this initiative and grow their businesses. Most of us use social media a lot. In Nigeria, social media is quite a big phenomena. You see a lot of people on social media, but most of the time we have not even actually utilized social media to its full potential. When we look at, for example, the movie industry, there are so many peripheral and subsidiaries surrounding that industry itself in terms of creative design, movie production, digital movie productions, stage setting, content writing and delivery. There are so many people that have fantastic content, but don't actually have a channel or way to actually put it out there, and more importantly, commercialize it. So one of the most important, or should I say, one of the blocking factors for people to actually realize their goal are two things, basically. You have a business idea, but you don't know how to commercialize it, and you don't know how to scale it. So with this kind of intervention in the CBN is offering, in some cases, offering even like a 36-month moratorium period. Again, it's non-interest, so that's pretty self-explanatory. These are things that we can key into and plan a business so that we can able to commercialize, make it financially viable, and at the same time be able to grow it and scale. From a technology point of view, I think some of the requirements that we... Am I good to go? Sorry, I just heard some noise. Okay, so when we look at it from a technology perspective, in terms of this financing, I would encourage people to look at the planning stage. There's what we call control objectives for business information related technologies, and it has a framework whereby you plan and you organize. That's the first framework, and then you deliver, you acquire and implement. Sorry, then you deliver and support, and then you monitor and evaluate. These are the four frameworks that governs this control objectives for business related business information related technologies. So for example, I will give you a very grassroots example. I know a lady who has a seasonal business. There's a fruit we call agwaluma. Everybody knows that, right? And the lady used to import this, I think, from one of the African neighboring countries, not even selling the ones we have in Nigeria. And initially she started selling it on Instagram, and it became very popular. So we thought, okay, why don't you use technology instead of having a cash and carry delivery? And sometimes, that's quite tedious. Why don't you install a payment gateway? Okay, what technology does for you is that it removes your overheads from the brick and mortar traditional way of doing business, where you have to have an office, you have to have inventory and prepare logistics, you have to have a store and all these kind of things. If you move everything online, the funding that you will get from these kind of initiatives that the CBN is providing would allow you to invest in your product, in product development, in your digital and online presence, and also in technologies like payment gateways for you to be able to collect money without actually dealing with cash. This for many people would be a game changer, because first and foremost, it allows you to scale without you having to increase your operational costs. I always tell people that I think the biggest assets we have actually in Nigeria are Nigerians. There are other things you can look at. For example, the north of Nigeria has a lot of interactions and businesses with neighboring countries. There's the African Free Trade area that is being created now, where you're almost creating a super conglomerate like you have with the EU. So this kind of initiatives allows us to step outside of our comfort zone and move away from that box that we know. Everybody knows the phrase that we coined, think outside the box. So if you like, step outside of that box and embrace this new reality that we're in, and embrace the technology. The finance is now becoming available with these kind of initiatives. I think we can key into these things and try and commercialize and scale our business ideas. There's a lot of, in fashion, you can look at things like augmented reality. Again, this is superimposing technology on the business. And like I said, I have to look at the things from a technology point of view, because technology is the driving factor of pretty much everything these days. I'll give an example. If you use Google, for example, there's what we call Google 3D, just on the very basic level. And you can Google animals, for example, and have an animal in your sitting room, a tiger or lion or whatever. This is augmented reality at play. So imagine having a fashion house, a fashion brand, you're developing African attire, and you can use technology to enable people to actually augment their reality by having these dresses on them, and they can see what it actually looks like, or on their children, so they can actually see what it looks like and what they like. Again, these are the things that people have to do that will make them different, that would enable you to compete competitively in this 21st century, because this century is for those that have the problem-solving skills and creative design thinking and initiatives of this nature. I don't know how I'm doing with time. If the moderator can advise me.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I mean, I think what you've done quite well in introducing the topic and in encouraging people on the need for them to step outside the box and to embrace technology, you know, and those that have problem solving skills, what you've told them is that they now have an opportunity, you know, to actually ensure that they are able to access finance. We thank you so much, Mr. Abubakar, for coming in at a short notice for Mohamed Jega. And I'm sure there will be a few questions. So if you have some time and you can still stay online, you'll be able to answer questions after this. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So we'll go to the next presentation, and that is by our executive at SunTrust Bank, Mr. Abukadri Abioye, who is going to speak to us about the accessing facilities in the creative industry. So we have you, Mr. Abioye. Please go ahead.
Good morning, gentlemen, ladies. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Hello.
Please go ahead, Mr. Abioye. We can hear you. Okay, while Mr. Abdulkadir Abioye is trying to fix his technology challenge, we'll go straight to Dr. Mohamed Dabiri. Dr. Mohamed Dabiri is on standby to take the presentation now.
Akim, I'm back.
Okay, please go ahead now. Yeah.
Hello, Akim. Okay. Good morning, all. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And welcome to another session of this occasion facilitated by Marble Capital and also supported by NASFAT, the Guilds of Muslim Professionals, and MICA. It is actually a great initiative, and it is one of the encouragements by leaders in the Islamic society for us to create this kind of engagement in order to bring the awareness of the Sharia compliant intervention facility to the targeted audience. We go on with the slides now. So the Sharia compliant intervention facility introduced by the Central Bank of Nigeria is a very encouraging policy that is meant to, factor in the sector, those of us who are running away from that, just to be able to let us also participate in the economy. And I'll also say kudos to those that have been behind it, trying to get this done. Just like the president of NASFAT said, that it's just like when we were clamoring to get an Islamic bank, you know, so things would always get better. And for this to come at this stage, it's to show that we are making progress to ensure that Islamic banking proposal gets to everyone that needs it, and we're all included in the economy, in the finance economy of the nation. So as you can see on screen is the list of the interventions that are just being introduced. And today we're going to be looking at the creative industry financing initiative. The next slide. Mr. Abubakar, who represented Mohamed Jega, has given us a brief into the opportunities in in the creative industry, particularly the information technology part of it, which for me, I believe it's the major part of it, because whatever you do, you can always apply technology to it. And as you come up with those fantastic ideas in applying technology to all we do, this part of the financing is available for you to be able to implement those things. Next slide, please. So the mandate of this session, it's for us to see the highlights of the Creative Industry Financing Initiative, also to share the process of assessing the facility vis-a-vis the requirement by CBN, and then of course SunTrust Bank, the transaction dynamics for the seamless implementation of the initiative, and also to charge us to use this information to our benefits. Because sometimes we attend a lot of session workshops and we just go back and not make use of the information therein. So it is to give us the motivation and the hope to let us know that these things are achievable. And while we are getting those funds, we should also know that we have the responsibility to ourselves, to our country, to God. It is not a national cake like anyone would assume for it to be. And we should approach it with the purest of intention. If we come in with intention that we're assessing these funds for this purpose and we have the intention to pay back, Allah will always make it easy for us to pay back. Thereafter, we'll look at questions and answer. Next slide, please. Now, the Creative Industry Financing Initiative was introduced by the Central Banks of Nigeria in collaboration with the Bankers Committee. And the intention is to boost job creation in Nigeria, particularly among the youths. When we're talking about the youth, we are looking at the ages between 18 and 35. So that's very important to note. It provides an improved access to long-term, low-cost financing by entrepreneurs and investors in the creative and information technology subsector. You will see in operational features why it says that it provides access to long-term, low-cost, because you get up to 36 months moratorium, which is more than enough for you to put your business into perspective and then be able to pay returns. Then the modalities and transaction dynamics for the seamless implementation of the initiative has also been outlined by CBN, which we are going to see in this presentation today. Next slide, please. Now, the objective, it is to improve access to low cost and sustainable financing. The funds come at a single digit. Boost job creation, particularly among the youth, as explained earlier, to reduce the unemployment rate that we currently have amongst the youths, and to enhance the entrepreneurial potentials of youths within the Nigerian creative and information technology subsector for economic development. So this kind of initiative should be able to make the youth think out of the box, think creatively, come up with something, knowing fully well that there are areas where funds can be accessed to implement whatever they come up with. And it is generally to complement other development finance initiative of the CBN to accelerate financial inclusion. Because of that, and I believe we do not want to assess interest-based transaction, which completely, exclude us from financing. But alhamdulillah, we have this now, and we would be included in the finance initiative. Next slide. So now the eligibility is for existing enterprises in the creative industry, for startups who engage in the creative industry, students of higher institution engage in software development. Next slide. So now, to put it in focus now, there are certain verticals, the focal subsectors, which we can also be referred to as the target markets for this funding. You have the fashion, information technology, movie, and music. For the fashion side, you have the designers, who can include the seamstress and what have you. Information technology, which I think is the widest part of it for me. Then the student software development financing. For the information technology is very key for me because you can apply it to fashion, movie, and music, and any other thing. So a lot for me should come from that side, from our teaming youth. Next slide. So the next slide is the funding of the initiative. A seed fund of 22.9 billion has been allocated from the Agribusiness Small and Medium Enterprise Investment Scheme to take care of this initiative. And you can see from the table there, the amount that is allocated for each of the target markets. The student software development has 4%. Information technology and the music has 24% each. The movie production has 13%. You have movie distribution 18%. Fashion 17%. Next slide. Going to the operational features of the initiative. The next slide. This is where particular attention should be paid to, because this spells out the requirements, the documentations that are required to access this. You have the features there for the first three segments: the software development, movie production and distribution. Single obligor limit, which is the limit that the single entity can access at a time. For the student software is 3 million. You have 15 million for the production and 500 million for the distribution. And the rate of return generally is 9% per annum. And then we have moratorium, 9 months for the student software loan, which happens to be the least moratorium period in this in the whole initiative. You have 24 months for the movie production and 24 months for the movie distribution. Repayments for student software loan is monthly, while the other two, you have for movie production quarterly and then monthly for distribution. The security arrangements for the student software facility, you do not require any equity contribution. You must have a university degree. That I think should be a higher institution degree, or more clarification will still be, required on a few of these security, but we have to test it first to be able to give feedback to the regulators. NYSC certificate, credible guarantor, personal guarantee, and other conditions must gain admission into a training organization that has job placements contracts, no bad credit records, and preference for areas with low IT penetration. So it's just to charge us to think and implement things that have low IT penetration. Those are the areas are prioritized. Next slide. Next slide. Then you have the funding structure. For the software facility, it's entirely 100% of the facility, while the other two, you have to give 30% equity contribution, while the institution brings in 70%. Then the disbursement will be in phases with agreed milestone based on the dynamic of the business that you're doing. And the repayment source, the expected payment source will be from proceeds of software sales or patent usage for the software development facility, while the others will be proceeds from the business itself. Next slide, please. Similarly, for the fashion and IT target markets. Next slide. The equipment purchase or rental service fees will be financed. The rate of return is also 9% generally. Tenure, you have 10 years to pay back. Moratorium, 36 months. Repayments quarterly. The security arrangements, there's for this you have 20% equity contribution, and you have other security arrangements: mortgage debenture, equity, mortgage, lien on the stock of trade and the items of equipment. Other conditions are at least 3 referrals from recognized sponsors or bodies or association. You know, in this case, bodies like I believe bodies like NASFAT, MICA, Guilds of Muslim Professionals, and other maybe association of the trades that you're into. Minimum of 3 years relevant experience, no bad credit history. Same for the other information technology and for music. Next slide. The funding structure in the next slide is 80% facility and 20% equity contribution. Next slide, please. Then the disbursement as well is in accordance with the agreed milestone and taking into cognizance the dynamic of the business. Then the repayment is generally proceeds of the business or from this income you get from the service that you provide with the initiative. Next slide. So the next slide takes us to the transaction dynamics. This is the process that you go through from start to finish. So the applicant approaches any participating financial institution, which include all non-interest bank and non-interest microfinance banks, with the business plan detailing how much and everything that is, information that is required to show that you have a genuine business. Then the PFI, as the participating financial institution, provides the applicant with the documentation required, which are some of the things that we have discussed here, both for the CBN and the institution for assessing of the bank balance. So the bank carries out due diligence of the application and documentation. Successful applicants are issued offer letters with repayment schedule in accordance with the business dynamics. So the successful applications with their offer letters and what have you would be forwarded to the CBN for consideration and release of facility amount to the bank, which is now passed on to the applicants. The bank disburses the facility within 10 days of receipt of funds from the CBN. Then the bank bears the credit risk and shall be responsible for monitoring the performance of the facility. You can see that the bank would bear the credit risk, which means that the bank would take every care to ensure that we disburse or we give these facilities to customers or prospects that are capable of paying back. Next slide, please. The next slide is just summarizes the relationship between the central bank, the participating financial institution, and the prospective customer. So the CBN releases funds to the PFI. The bank serves as the agent who now finances the eligible activity using any of the non-interest financing products, Muraba, Salam, Istisna, Ijara, as applicable. Then the rate of return, all inclusive, it shouldn't be more than 9%. Next slide, please. Now, the basic requirement on the part of SunTrust Bank. Next slide. To commence the application processes. In order to assess the request, you must have all the KYC and account opening documents in place. You give us an application or a request, satisfactory credit report from 2 credit bureaus, 6-month account statement from another bank if you do not have account with SunTrust or your account is not up to 6 months. Projected cash flow for the tenure of the facility to show projections of your targets, what you intend to achieve. Then 3 years audited financials management or management account where applicable. Pro forma invoice of asset to be financed in the case of assets acquisition. And upon successful application, further documentations like a letter of undertaking to domicile proceeds of business, you execute all the related Moraba, Ijara contract agreements, then all other requirements as stated in the CBN documentations too will have to be in place, and then based on your individual circumstances, we will be able to know the price of additional requirements if in need. Next slide, please. So the monitoring and evaluation lies solely on the bank. However, the regulator too, from time to time, would carry out joint monitoring, and the reports shall be submitted to the Director of Development Finance Department of the CBN on the performance of the facility. Next slide, please. Infractions and penalty, just for us to be sure that there are controls in place and that the PFs carry out this initiative as directed by the regulators. There are infractions and there are penalties in place, which are listed here. And I believe with this penalties in place, customers should be well assured, or target audience should be motivated or have the faith that the PFIs will do what is required to be done. Next slide. In the case of discontinuation of the facility, it's also part of the requirements, expectation from the PFIs, that whenever a financing is repaid or the facility is otherwise discontinued, the PFIs shall advise the CBN immediately, giving particulars of the facility. Any outstanding amounts under the facility is to be refunded to the agribusiness small and medium enterprise initiative fund account within 7 days. So these are strict guidelines that should be followed by the PFIs. Next slide. And just for us to know that this is the first of its kind intervention by the CBN, and they are going to be reviewed from time to time. And I want to encourage us that we need to stress this initiative. We need to go all out to access. This way we will come up with valuable feedback for the regulators to make the initiative better by the time they come up with another review. Or we can force a review based on our feedback, but we have to make a move. Otherwise, we would not, have it better. So that's it from me. I know we'll have a question and answer. That way we'll be able to also cover whichever area that we have not been able to cover in the course of the presentation.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Kadri Abioye, and we really appreciate your session and we appreciate your contributions. We're going to go now to Dr. Dabiri. Dr. Dabiri is going to speak to us regarding how to access the CBN non-interest credit for the healthcare sector. We hope all the doctors in the house, the nurses in the house, they are present and they're going to listen to this because it's going to be very, very important and relevant to them. Dr. Dabiri, please. Bismillah.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Firstly, let me thank the GMP, NASFAT, MPAC, and MICA, and Marble Capital for putting this together. We pray Allah will put it in their good work on the day of Yom Al-Qiyamah, inshallah. The topic that's been given to me is CBN non-interest credit support for the health sector. And inshallah, I would start right away, inshallah. Next slide, please. It's just a table of contents because of time. I'll just skip that, inshallah. So if we look at the current healthcare sector in Nigeria, some of the highlights are actually listed in the slide. Currently, the estimated worth of the healthcare sector is 5 billion per annum. And out of that, 1 billion is lost to medical tourism, meaning people who actually leave the country in search of healthcare. And the budget of the government right now, in terms of GDP, is just 6% of GDP, which is quite low. Hence the reason why the CBN is looking for different means to incentivize the health sector. Doctors as well are trained, over 3,000 are trained in the country, and over 63% of those practice abroad. We all listened to the news recently where a lot of doctors that were trying to leave the country were denied access because they don't have the right papers. A lot of them have already crossed over. We saw that also in the news. Secondly is the underpayment by the doctors as well in the health sector. In the pharmaceutical sector as well, we have issues. The worth is over 2 billion, and 8 out of the 130 pharmaceutical firms are those listed on the stock exchange. Hence, there's a huge potential for growth in that sector as well. Diagnosis as well has its own problem. So I remember most of the time when you have any, ailment that requires diagnosis, you probably have to go to UI, Lutz, or go to any of the big private hospitals. The cost is also, tremendous. So there's a lot of growth in that sector as well. Next slide, please. Now, some of these issues, if not all, is what the central bank is trying to solve, and that's why they actually introduced the intervention. And some of the objective is to actually provide low-cost financing, specifically for the non-interest one. One of the major reasons is to bring about financial inclusion, that is to allow access for those who, for their faith reason, that they can't go into the interest-based intervention. And that reminds me to just mention that in Surah Al-Baqarah, in verse 275, Allah warns about riba there, that those who eat riba will not stand on the day of resurrection, except like the standing of a person beaten by shaitan, leading him to insanity. So if we remember that, we will know that we need to shy away or not go near interventions that has to do with riba. It's also looking at shared services to reduce the cost of healthcare, meaning we need to close ranks, come together, and actually bring up solutions that can actually make use of this intervention. And the COVID-19 actually exposed the health sector as well. Hence, and it increased the need for investment in the health sector. Next slide, please. So the aims and objective, just like we mentioned earlier, to reduce the tourism, finance infrastructure development in terms of health in Nigeria, provide affordable credit to support local production by pharmaceutical companies, reducing dependency on foreign healthcare, thereby conserving foreign exchange for healthcare, and to increase the output, generate employment, diversify the revenue base, and increase foreign earnings and financial inclusion as well. Next slide, please. Who are those that can benefit from this intervention? We've said the healthcare product manufacturers, and that could be pharmaceutical, drugs, medical equipment, and technology. Health services providers, including establishment and expansion of current health providers, pharmaceutical industry, medical products, distribution, logistics, supplies and equipment, research and development as well, and other human health services that is active within the value chain. Next slide, please. How does the scheme works? Now, the scheme shall be funded by the Rural Sector Support Facility Differentiated Cash Reserve Requirements. And that's a document that I've actually put the link in the references for those of us who want to go through it. It's a document by the CDM that provides guidance on how the facility is going to work. The disbursements are made by participating financial institutions, and those are the non-interest deposit banks and the DIS, that is the Development Financial Institutions. And those are Jais Bank, Taj Bank, Sterling Alternative, and SunTrust Bank. Now, one of the important things I just want to mention as well, and that's why it's highlighted, is the fact that the NFIFI shall deposit, that is the banks that are going to disburse the funds. That is, they're going to deposit securities equivalent to 120% of the facility amount as collateral, which means if they give any obligor, that is any business that actually requires this intervention, if they give out $1 million to that obligor, then the central bank must have a collateral of 1.2 million with the central bank. And if that business fails due to negligence on the part of the obligor, the bank would actually take the money from that collateral of the bank, which means if we fail due to negligence on our own side, we are putting the bank itself at risk. It's important we understand that. Next slide, please. the financials. 20% of the average of 3 years of a company's turnover is what you can get from the intervention, for the intervention, subject to a maximum of 500 million naira per obligor. Okay, so the maximum you can get is 500 million when it comes to working capital. If the company has operated for less than 3 years, then 20% of the previous year turnover will suffice. So meaning you don't have a 3 years account or operating accounts, then that of the previous year will do. Then term financing is a maximum of 2 billion naira per obligor. The rate of return, like mentioned by my brother earlier, is maximum of 9%. But till February 28, 2021, it is 5% per annum. But as from 1st of March 2021, the rate of return shall not be more than 9%. Now that rate of return goes to the PFI, and the PFI will then share that with the central bank. The central bank has been magnanimous, and it has been able to just take 3% out of that 9%, and the 6% then goes to the PFI. As we can see, the risk on the bank is more, so they get more of the share of the profit. Working capital, there's a rollover of a year in case you can't return after a year. Then principal repayment is by installment basis to PFI, while the PFI then remits payment received to CBN on quarterly basis. Next slide, please. Now, the collateral that the CBN requires from the PFI could be federal government sukuk, where it's available, and the CBN non-interest liquidity management instruments such as the safe custody account, non-interest notes, asset-backed securities, or it could be guarantees, sukuk backed by guarantees of the federal government and the likes. Next slide, please. Modalities of CBN. A corporate entity shall submit an application to a PFI of its choice with a bankable business plan. Then the PFI shall appraise and conduct due diligence on the application. Once approved by PFIs, the credit committee, once approved, the PFI credit committee, the application will be submitted to CBN, attaching the relevant documents. Then the CBN will process and disburse funds, if they've met the requirements, to the PFI for onward release to the project. The disbursement of the fund by CBN to the PFI shall be based on a restricted mudaraba. That is, whatever the business plan says, CBN will approve that and ensure that money goes to that only. So it is restricted to that particular project only between the CBN and PSR, as in the RSS scheme. Then the PFI will then release the funds to the project based on CBN approval contract for NIFIs. Next slide, please. Now, what does the banks that actually disburse the facilities require from the business or the applicants who wants to make use of this incentive? The first thing is that you must open a corporate account with these non-interest banks and then provide bank statements from other banks that you have, that is the conventional bank, if you have an account with them for a year. You must also provide a business plan, which must state explicitly your financial plan, economic benefits, environmental impact assessment reports as well. You must also show documentation of the actual cash flow for 1 year and the projected cash flow for the facility tenor. You need to have your certificate of incorporation from CAC, brief of directors, and the credit report of 2 directors as well from the credit bureau. You must also have BOQ for construction. If it's an equipment, you must have a pro forma invoice and proposed schedule of fund disbursement as well. Then a collateral, very important. And my talking to some of the non-interest banks, obviously, if they are going to have a collateral with the CBN, that's about 120%, then they will be looking to ask for something higher than that to cover to reduce their own risk. Audited financials for 3 years for existing companies or statement of affairs of startups and companies with less than 3 years. So if they don't have a 3 years audited financials because they've just started, then they need to have a statement of affairs for startups. Next slide, please. Responsibilities of CBN to provide clear guidance and implementation of the facility. We've seen a lot of members of the FRACE, which is the Financial Regulation Advisory Council of Experts, doing a lot of presentation on this facility to make it clear in terms of how it's going to work. Sensitive stakeholders and conduct impact evaluation. When it's been disbursed, then they have to evaluate how it's the impact. Provide a seed fund for the scheme. Release funds to PFI for disbursement to successful applicants. Review the guidelines of the facility as may be necessary. Review and process periodic returns from PFI. Monitor and evaluate implementation of the scheme. Next slide, please. The responsibilities of the non-interest banks themselves. To confirm and review applicants submitted by the customers, conduct due diligence on all applications, issue offer letters and forward qualified applications to CBN, disburse the related funds to successful applicants, monitor the project and recover the financial amount from the beneficiaries, maintain adequate records of all beneficiaries and facilities, then forward the returns on the prescribed formats to the CBN, comply with guidelines, and carry out any other duties as the CBN may prescribe from time to time. Now, responsibilities of the beneficiaries. It is important that beneficiaries actually make sure that the intervention goes to exactly what it is meant for, as that will be an infraction of the project, on the fund or on the intervention if it is not used as such. It is not meant to be diversified. It is meant to be used as it is being said or approved for. It's also important that there is an insurance as well that covers the project in case of any adversity. Okay. So we should also, another thing is to make all the projects and the records available for inspection and verification by PFIs and the CBN. Okay, next slide, please. Infraction. Facility diversion, delay or non-release of funds to beneficiaries within the timelines agreed on the offer letter shall attract penalty at the PFI maximum financing rate. Like I said earlier, the PFI is actually being squeezed a lot in this intervention. If there's negligence, like I said earlier, on the part of the obligor, then if the PFI does not refund the money back to the CBN coffers, then the CBN is going to hit on the collateral that the PFI has with the CBN. Now, the end for the intervention is 31st December 2030, and like my brother said earlier, there's room for amendment as this is a new intervention by the CBN. Just in conclusion, I want to advise that this is the time for us to act. We've been clamoring for Islam and Sharia compliant solution for years, and this is the time to take advantage of that. We've spoken about it a lot. This is the time to act. This is the time to close ranks, come together, and come up with how to utilize these opportunities that is facing us. We should also engage financial consultants to assist the application, because most of the banks do have consultants that they work with that can make the accessibility of the intervention easy for us. We're also complaining that there's no enough non-interest financial institutions or banks in Nigeria. I just want to remind us that it is the responsibility of all of us, yourself and myself, to work together to create more of this. Nobody's going to do it for us. It's our responsibility. We should wake up to it and work to improve on that. And finally, this is an honor for us and not a national cake. It is a national responsibility, especially for the Ummah. We complain about poverty within the Ummah. This is an opportunity for us to improve on those figures in terms of that. I pray to Allah to reward those behind the project and make this an opportunity for the Ummah to grow. Inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you very much, Dr. Dabiri, for this wonderful session. I think if there's nothing we are taking away from this, these recommendations are actually something we should not forget about. I mean, we have the maximum number of people on this webinar, and we are on Zoom, and we also have more than 400 people listening in and watching via YouTube Live. So please, we are going to take your questions now, but please don't forget that the time to act is now. You should take advantage of this non-interest facilities, and you should engage financial consultants to help you with the applications. Let's create more non-interest financial institutions, but more importantly, let us participate in these NFIs. By the poll we did at the beginning of the session, we had only 44% of participants saying that they actually have accounts with non-interest financial institutions. Let this increase. All Muslims, we should actually have accounts with all the non-interest financial institutions, and also, please, this is an amana. It is not a national cake. It is a national responsibility. So having said that, we'll go straight to the questions and answers. We'll ask our brothers to just answer some of the questions. I'll just read a few of them. I know Mr. Abioye and Mr. Jega, they've been answering some. So we'll just ask some of the questions. So Mr. Abioye, okay, there is a question here that Jazakumullah for putting this together. Does it mean we can apply funds for this fund via SunTrust Bank? Do you want to speak to this a bit more? I know you've already answered in the Q&A segment, please.
Okay, yeah, just like
and please speak a bit louder, sir.
Okay, so just like I responded to the question, as stated in the presentation, you can access for this financing from any of the non-interest banks. And we have the Jais Bank, we have Taj Bank, we have Sterling Alternative, we have SunTrust Bank non-interest window operation. So it's open from any of those banks.
Thank you very much. The other question here is that for folks that are just starting new businesses, how do we access the loans? I mean, I want to believe the answer you gave now will also be together, will also align. Maybe we should go straight to Mr. Jagger. Is there any website to access CBN technology intervention for scaling business, or one has to visit the offices? I think Mr. Kadri has also answered this as well. So let's go to some of the questions on YouTube. So one of the questions here is, does this initiative consider civil servants that are about to retire, especially nowadays, now that their benefits is no longer as interesting as they think it will be? Mr. Kadri, do you want to answer that, please? Civil servants.
Okay, so what I would say, what I would say will be generally, because I also know that there are a few bankers or other corporate workers that would be involved in a few other things and would want to benefit from the financing. My answer will be a yes, that we can attempt to apply, because I haven't seen anything that is saying that you cannot. So the most important thing is you have a business to do, and then it's genuine. That's the core, objective of this financing.
Okay, thank you very much. There's a question here as well. Can one apply for loan restructuring? Should there be unforeseen business exigencies that hinder repayment of the facility? Kadri?
Okay, let me think that quickly. It's something that hasn't been part of the Islamic financing contracts in the past, but with the pandemic that has come, it has brought out other things that needs to be embedded in it. So we've made rulings on the fact that we can restructure financing, whether Muraba, whether Ijara. So there have been rulings in that line, depending on the circumstances surrounding the failure. For example, you finance a customer on Muraba basis, and then suddenly a case of a pandemic comes up and there's a lockdown. You cannot, continue the business. There is no inflow or income coming in. That's a very clear case, and it stands it qualifies for restructuring. So the customer and the bank will sit together and come up with an agreed template to forge ahead, so that the business does not die, or that you don't lose on both ends.
Thank you very much. There are two questions here that will go to Dr. Dabiri. In the health sector, is there any provision for people that wants to start small? That is, opening small clinics, pharmacies, and small-scale drug distribution? That is one question. The second question is, how do we access the relevant financial consultants? You mentioned the fact that we should engage consultants. Do you have any specific recommendations? So those questions for you, Dr. Dabiri, please.
Thank you very much, Brother Blakim. First, on the first one, as regards startups, if it's a new business, the CBN doesn't really mention anything about new startups in their documentation. But I would suggest that you contact the PFIs, any of them, and have a chat with them. there might be other arrangements that they could come up with, but the documentation doesn't say anything about startups. The minimum they ask of is at least you must have a year account in there to show. So, and if you're a startup, a new startup, probably you won't have that. Secondly, is on the, I don't know if if my other brother Abdul Qadir wants to say anything on that, because he's in the banking sector. He might be able to answer that. On the second one, that's on the
consultants.
The consultants. I think in the session last week, one of the presenters actually mentioned that the banks actually are the one that suggests what consultants they use. I would suggest whichever bank you go to, if you need help, let them know and they will point you in the right direction. And I think that's, if I'm right, Marble might also be able to help as well in that sector. And I think there are other ones as well, but I'm not convinced with those ones in Nigeria. But the banks that you go to should be able to guide you on what consultants to use.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dabiri. And yes, Marble Capital will be able to guide you if you need a financial consultant for your business, for your investments, options as well. And you can also go to the banks, SunTrust Bank.
Okay, to quickly add to what
finance.
Startups, and then
okay.
Not. Hello?
Please speak louder, Mr. Kadiri.
Okay, so just to add to what Dr. Dabiri said regarding startups, and this is applicable to all of the other initiative. And like I said, it is new. And then we would come across a lot of questions in this regards. And the more we get, the better for us. So if we test the initiative, we'll be able to gather valuable feedback that we can get back to the regulators so that they can come up with specific guidelines regarding every circumstances that is available. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kadiri. Okay, we have a few more questions that we've not been able to address, but I will just read two of them really. What is the difference between the rate of return and normal interest rates in a conventional bank? That is one. Two, participants are asking for the addresses of the banks, SunTrust Bank and the like. The question also is that does Jaiz Bank also provide these offers? Once Mr. Kadiri answers this, we're going to go to two persons that have raised their hands. One of them, Mr. Hassan Mohamed Kura, and also Dr. Salahuddin Jubril. Dr. Salahuddin Jubril will actually perform two functions. He will close this session for us and he will also make his remarks. So Bismillah, Mr. Kadiri, what is the difference between rate of return and normal interest rate in a conventional bank? And how can we get the addresses of the banks that are providing all these facilities? Thank you.
Okay, so the rate of returns, it's the interest rate is different from the returns that we talk about when it comes to non-interest banking, but because we operate in an economy and then we have benchmarking and what have you, the process of financing under the non-interest banking is what makes the difference. If, for example, you're talking about a Muraba now, you want to give out, you want to buy acquire an asset, or you want to buy an inventory. So the bank will acquire it in its name and sell it to you with a markup. So the markup is what you look at as the rate of return, and you put it in percentage. In any case, it's just to, put the numbers in percentage. That's why you will have a rate of return say to be 9% or 20% or what have you. But the transaction dynamic, the process flow for non-interest banking, and the principle guiding the financing has to be in line with the Sharia. So that's the major difference with when you have for interest. Because for interest, you want a loan, you get the cash, and that is all, irrespective of what you do with it. And for our address, we are on number 1 Oladile Olashuri Street off Sanusi Fafua in Victoria Island. That's where our head office is. We have another branch in Idumota, but we pride ourselves as a fintech bank. If you go to our website, www.suntrustng.com, you can open an account online. Just be specific that it's an NIB account you want to open, and from there we'll contact you, and then your branch is in your palm. Once you have a smartphone, you can do whatever you want to do. And the other banks that you can access this financing from, I've mentioned it before, all the other non-interest bank, Jaiz Bank, Taj Bank, and Sterling Alternative, and they are in most places that we can reach. Brother Kim, is that all?
That's all for now. Thank you so much. Mr. Hassan Mohamed Kura, you raised your hand. You want to ask a question now, sir? Okay, so we'll go to the conclusion of the session, and would like to invite the Director of Projects from MPAC, Dr. Jibril Salahuddin, to give us closing remarks and to let us be aware that we still have a session next week, which is next week, Saturday, same time. So Dr. Salahuddin Jibril, please.
Thank you very much, moderator. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum salam wa barakatuh.
Lovely. I trust everybody can hear me. I want to thank everybody for participating actively in this session. And I particularly presenters. All the presenters that are presented this morning have done wonderfully well. From our brother, Dr. Muhammad Dabiri, to our brother Muhammad Jega, was ably represented, as well as my teacher and my brother, Brother Abdul Qadir Adiri. Thank you very much, all of you, for having fine time to come in here this morning to address us. I will make I would like to make very fast remarks, 6 remarks very quickly. While we have all this initiative that come to us, alhamdulillah, from the Central Bank of Nigeria, for us to be able to access credit, we must not fall short of some realities in our midst. We always think that accessing financing is everything that is it in business. At least this has shown us an important lesson that first of all, we need to have the entrepreneurial initiative before we go into financial drive. So we need to step up. Every organization across the country, Islamic organization, should have an entrepreneurial table that will help them nurture the entrepreneurial initiative of all their members. Restructuring, very important. We spoke about it this morning. Let us all pen it down and go back to the Central Bank of Nigeria as part of our add-on. Restructuring has always been part of Islamic finance everywhere in the world. This cannot be an exception. There seems to be a lump up between existing business and startup. The mechanism and the management of these two businesses is not the same. What I've seen in this initiative is that we have copied wholesome from existing businesses and try to Islamatize it. So we need to go back and start asking questions regarding it, because the cap for which you use to whether a startup is completely different from what you use to whether an existing business. Starting small in the health sector should be encouraged. We need to find a way to put our brothers and sisters together in such a way that they can form quick partnership and begin to start up small in the health sector. We have a lot of gap in this regard. Each organization should create a consultancy table. Every organization should have a consultancy table where members of the cooperative or individuals who wants to access the fund can come in and touch base with them. I encourage that you go in more as consultant. When you go in there more as consultant, your case are easier for you to deal with. We also need to look at the realities of these businesses. In the creative sector, like we said, if you look at the creative sector, there is the creativity and there's the ability to sell for profit, which are completely different. There's a hype and there's the money. They are completely different. And some of the creative industry we've spoken about, especially in the software sector, they've actually stayed for 5-10 years without making profit. I mean, you can take the platform we're currently using at the moment, for instance, Zoom. Zoom was never profitable until the pandemic. And as such, you won't expect that you want to create such a platform and it's just profitable overnight. We need to take another deep look at this. In the fashion sector, if you look at the fashion sector, fashion goes beyond just sewing clothes. Okay, so they need to create clothing lines and the rest of it. And at this peculiar time in our development, where a lot of people are only looking at what to do to survive, we need to be very careful as we approach this sector. Now, having closed with all those few remarks, let me once again thank you all for finding time to come in for this. I also want to thank the organizers for the wonderful time that they've put into this place and organizing it. And let us go back, like Dr. Dabiri has actually advised us, to action this instead of turning it into another theological discussion. We need to really action this and go back, take the message to the grassroots, action it, and move this forward. Let's not also forget by come next week, Saturday, this same time, we're going to have another session on this, inshallah, by which we'll still be discussing another yet important topic relating to this. So may Allah assist us. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you everyone for being part of this today. We can always check the live stream and on YouTube, and we'll also be sent all the presentation materials. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam.